You can't just remove me. This is ridiculous.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but you have to leave the premises now.
You need to leave the premises immediately.
I haven't done anything wrong. Let go of my arm. I'm afraid we must ask you to leave the premises immediately.
On what grounds? This is unbelievable.
Let go of me. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't just do this.
I don't understand why you're doing this. I haven't broken any rules.
We apologize for the inconvenience, but the decision is final. I can't believe this is happening. This is completely unacceptable.
We're asking you to come with us quietly, ma'am. What is the meaning of this? I am not leaving this table.
Ma'am, you need to leave now or we will be forced to remove you. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't just throw me out of here. This is completely unacceptable.
Are you serious right now? I haven't done anything wrong. Let go of my arm.
You're causing a disturbance.
Please come with us quietly.
Sasha Thompson's breath hitched as she stepped inside the Grove, a trendy upscale restaurant nestled on the corner of Fifth and Pine. The clink of silverware and hushed murmurs filled the air, but a sudden, sharp hush seemed to envelop the room when she walked in. The hostess, a young woman in a crisp white uniform, smiled warmly, but only for a moment. Then her eyes flickered to Sasha's skin, her lips tightening slightly. "Reservation?" the hostess asked, her tone laced with an undercurrent of something unspoken. Sasha's grip on her purse tightened. "Yes, under Thompson." She met the hostess's eyes, trying to steady her racing heart. The hostess checked the list. "Sorry, I don't see your name here." A lie, Sasha thought. She'd booked the table weeks ago, specifically for tonight. But the hostess didn't seem to care. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. I made a reservation," Sasha said, her voice steady but growing increasingly aware of the eyes on her. She could feel the silent judgments, like daggers at her back. The hostess shifted uncomfortably, tapping her pen against the reservation book. "I'll have to check with the manager." Sasha's stomach churned as she glanced around, meeting the eyes of a few patrons who immediately looked away. Not again, she thought. Minutes passed. The manager, a tall man with a sharp suit, approached, his gaze briefly scanning her before he gave a polite but firm smile. "We're full tonight, ma'am," he said, without offering an explanation. "You'll have to leave." The words stung like ice, and Sasha's voice faltered. "But I'm afraid you'll have to leave," he repeated, more insistently now. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. She was being dismissed, cast aside without reason, and as she turned to walk out, a cold, hollow truth settled in her chest. It's not a mistake. It's never a mistake. Sasha Thompson stood in front of the large glass door of the Grove, the upscale restaurant she had been dreaming of visiting for months. The warmth from the streetlights outside contrasted with the cool air inside, and as she stepped in, the world seemed to hush. The clink of glasses, the soft murmur of conversation. Everything slowed down for a moment, the energy of the room shifting. She had been here before, though never as a guest, always in her role as an aspiring entrepreneur. But tonight, it was different. Tonight, she was here to celebrate a milestone, a successful pitch that would change the course of her career. She had picked the Grove specifically for this occasion. It was the kind of place that celebrated success and sophistication. The hostess at the front desk flashed a tight smile as Sasha approached. Her eyes scanned Sasha for just a second longer than necessary before she turned to the reservation book. "Reservation?" she asked, her voice clipped. "Yes," Sasha replied, smiling with practiced ease. "Under Thompson." The hostess's fingers danced across the page, the silence stretching between them. Sasha's smile faltered for a moment as the hostess's eyes flickered down to her skin before looking back at the book. "I'm sorry," the hostess said, voice thickening with barely concealed tension. "I don't see you here." A wave of discomfort washed over Sasha. She had made the reservation weeks ago, carefully planning every detail. She could feel the prickling awareness of all eyes in the restaurant on her, subtle but unmistakable. "No," Sasha said, her voice quiet but firm. "I made a reservation. Under Thompson." The hostess looked at her again, and there was something different now, an edge to the smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She tapped the reservation book twice with the tip of her pen. "Let me check with the manager," the hostess said, her tone barely apologetic, before she turned to leave. Sasha stood there, rooted to the spot. The room around her felt different now, heavier. She could feel the gaze of the other diners, eyes glancing and then quickly looking away. The subtle, silent dismissal. Not again. Sasha's grip tightened on her purse, her breath shallow. This wasn't new. This wasn't unfamiliar. But tonight, it felt different. The manager emerged from the back, a tall man with sharp features and a tailored suit. He surveyed the scene in front of him, Sasha, the hostess, and a few other patrons glancing over their shoulders. His gaze shifted down to her, assessing. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" The words were polite, but they held no warmth. "Yes," Sasha said, holding his gaze. "I had a reservation. Under Thompson. And your hostess told me you don't have it listed." The manager nodded slowly, his eyes gliding over the room before he returned his focus to her. "I'm afraid we're fully booked for the night," he said, each word precise, cold. "You'll have to leave." Sasha's heart dropped. The words felt like a slap, familiar, but stinging nonetheless. She opened her mouth to protest, to explain the reservation once more, but the words caught in her throat. She could already feel it, the heaviness of their eyes on her, the cold distance. This wasn't just about one mistake. This was something deeper, something colder. "No," Sasha said quietly. "There's been some mistake. I made a reservation. You can check again." Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. The manager didn't flinch. "I'm afraid you'll have to leave, ma'am," he repeated, his tone dismissive. Her fingers tingled with the urge to lash out, something sharp, something cutting, but the words died in her throat. This wasn't just about a reservation. It wasn't just about tonight. She was being dismissed, shut out, simply because of who she was. Sasha stood for a long, pregnant moment, her mind racing as she faced the cold, unblinking gaze of the manager. The silence between them stretched further, thickening like a fog. And then, slowly, the weight of it all pressed down on her chest. Sasha turned toward the door, her legs feeling stiff, like she was walking through molasses. The murmurs of the restaurant, the whispered conversations, none of them seemed to matter now. Her skin burned with the knowledge that she had just been told, "You don't belong here." The door clicked shut behind her with finality that echoed in her ears. And that was when she realized this wasn't a mistake. It was never a mistake. It was never about a reservation. She wasn't wanted here. Not because of who she was. No, not even that. It was because of the color of her skin. Sasha stood outside for a long moment, her fingers numb as she gripped the strap of her purse. The city buzzed around her, the world moving on, oblivious. And yet, everything felt heavy. "I'm not crazy," she told herself. "This isn't just about a mistake." She pushed away from the door, walking with slow, deliberate steps to the sidewalk. The cool night air felt sharp against her skin, but it did nothing to cool the fire in her chest. As she made her way to the car, she could feel the familiar ache inside her, one that had existed for as long as she could remember. The ache of being seen as less than. The ache of being dismissed because of something that had never been her fault. The ache of knowing that tonight, like so many other times before, it wasn't about being good enough. It was about being black. Sasha opened the door to her car, the metal cool against her fingers. As she slid into the seat, she let out a long, slow breath. The tears, the ones she kept at bay, burned the back of her eyes. But she didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she turned the ignition on and pulled away from the curb, her mind already plotting the next steps. She wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. The car hummed steadily beneath Sasha as she drove, but her mind was anything but calm. The streets blurred past her, the lights outside flashing like distant stars. But everything inside her felt a tornado of frustration. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel tighter, the leather cool beneath her skin. But her thoughts burned hot. This wasn't just a mistake. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, startling her. She glanced over, seeing Tasha's name on the screen. It was the kind of moment that felt like an omen, the kind where you know someone is trying to pull you out of your head, but the world inside feels too heavy to share. She took a deep breath, clicked the phone on, and put it on speaker. Girl, what happened? Tasha's voice was laser concern, but Sasha could hear the hint of disbelief too. You just said they wouldn't seat you? Sasha exhaled sharply, the sting still fresh. Yeah, the hostess said my reservation didn't exist. The manager came out, told me they were full, and that was it. I wasn't even allowed to explain. Tasha went silent for a moment, the hum of the line filling the space between them. Sasha's foot pressed hard on the gas as she navigated through the darkened streets, the sound of her tires skimming over the pavement filling her ears. She hated the silence between them, hated the words she knew were coming. Girl, you know how these places are, Tasha said finally, a calmness to her voice that only made Sasha's heart beat faster. It's not worth it. It's just one restaurant. I'm sure it was some kind of mix-up. Maybe they overbooked, or... No. Sasha cut her off, her voice sharper than she intended. It wasn't a mix-up. This wasn't about a reservation. This was about me being there. You know what I mean? Tasha didn't respond right away. Sasha could hear her friend exhale softly through the phone, the silence thickening as they both sat with the weight of the moment. Look, Tasha said after a pause, her tone softer now, almost coaxing. I get it, but do you really want to make a big deal out of this? You don't need that kind of stress. We don't have the energy for that fight right now. Sasha's grip on the wheel tightened even further, her knuckles white. She'd been hearing the same words her whole life, from people who didn't want to stir the pot, from people who thought letting it go was a path to peace. But she wasn't them. You don't get it, Sasha said, her voice quieter now, a hollow echo that matched the empty feeling inside her. It's not just this place. It's every damn place. I'm just tired of pretending it doesn't matter, Tasha. I'm tired of being invisible until I'm inconvenient. There was a long pause on the other end, and Sasha could feel the pull of old, familiar guilt gnawing at her. Guilt for feeling too much. Guilt for wanting more than to be good enough. Okay, Tasha said, finally breaking the silence. I hear you, but do you really think going public is the way to handle this? Think about it. Sasha, the last thing you need right now is more attention. It's just going to make things worse. Sasha closed her eyes for a brief moment, feeling the weight of her best friend's words. She wanted to be angry, wanted to lash out and scream that Tasha didn't understand. But deep down, she knew Tasha was trying to protect her in the only way she knew how. The silence stretched, but Sasha couldn't keep it all in. She needed to be heard. I'm tired of pretending I don't see it, Tasha. I'm tired of just being quiet, of letting people get away with this. This isn't just about the Grove. This is about every time they look at me like I don't belong. And I can't be silent anymore. Tasha sighed heavily. I know, baby, but just promise me you'll think about it. Whatever you do, don't let this consume you. You got so much more going for you. Sasha's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her palms ached. The streetlights flickered above her, casting their fleeting, wavering glow onto the car's windshield. I'll think about it, Sasha said, though the words felt hollow, like they didn't belong to her. She knew she couldn't let it go. As the phone call ended, Sasha's thoughts swirled like a storm inside her. She knew what she wanted to do. She had always known. But now, as she turned onto a quieter street, the weight of what it would mean settled on her shoulders like a heavy, suffocating cloak. It wouldn't be easy. She knew that. It never was. But the thought of letting this slide, of simply pretending it didn't matter, made her chest tighten with a feeling of defeat. She turned the car into her apartment complex parking lot, the familiar concreted ground beneath her tires offering no comfort. As she parked, the buzz of her phone startled her again. She glanced at the screen. It was a text message from her lawyer. We need to talk. It's time. Sasha's heart skipped a beat. Sasha sat in her car for a moment, the phone vibrating in her hand. The weight of what was coming, what she was about to do, pressed against her ribs, suffocating her, but also lighting a small flame of defiance inside her. Her thumb hovered over the screen for a moment, and then she typed a simple response. Let's do it. She couldn't stay silent anymore. The morning after the incident at the Grove was a blur of emotion. Sasha's mind raced as she sat at her kitchen table, sipping her coffee. The dark brew, usually so comforting, tasted bitter today. like everything else. She stared at her phone, her finger hovering over the screen. The message from her lawyer still sat there, a constant reminder of the next step she had to take. But before she could move forward, there was something she had to handle, something that gnawed at her from the inside out. The manager of the Grove had reached out. He wanted to apologize. The text was polite, almost too polite, and offered no explanation for the event. Instead, it spoke of a misunderstanding and invited Sasha to meet with him in person. Part of her wanted to throw her phone across the room. A misunderstanding? She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but it sure as hell wasn't this. She knew that apology meant nothing. It was just a PR move, an attempt to quiet the storm that was already brewing. Yet, for some reason, the thought of facing a man who had treated her like an outsider, as if she didn't belong there in the first place, made her stomach churn. Sasha didn't have much time to think about it. She was already running late. The meeting with her lawyer loomed in the back of her mind like an impending storm. But she couldn't ignore this, either. If anything, she needed to hear the hollow apology face to face. She needed to understand just how far they were willing to go to pretend it wasn't as bad as it truly was. The restaurant's address appeared on her phone's map, and she sighed, putting it down as she grabbed her coat. It wasn't just about confronting the manager. It was about making sure she wasn't going to be silenced. This meeting wasn't for closure. It was for her own dignity. The interior of the Grove looked as pristine as it had the night before. The same sharp edges, the same gleaming lights. But today, it felt like a place she no longer recognized. She stood in front of the hostess stand, where the same woman from the previous night was now offering a tight-lipped smile. The difference was palpable. There was no judgment in her eyes now, just a sort of vacant politeness. It didn't feel like a welcome. Sasha was led to the restaurant, her footsteps echoing across the quiet floor. The place seemed almost empty at this hour, but it didn't take much for her to remember the faces of the diners last night, the ones who avoided her gaze, that haunting silence. The manager, dressed in his sharp suit, was waiting for her at a small table in the back. His smile was smooth, too practiced, like it was a mask. "Ms. Thompson," he said, extending his hand toward her. "Thank you for coming. I'm glad we could meet today." Sasha glanced at his outstretched hand, but didn't take it. She stayed standing, the weight of her gaze locking onto his. His smile faltered just for a second, but it quickly returned. She could see the nerves in him now. Maybe for the first time, he wasn't in control. "I'm here," Sasha said, her voice tight but steady, "because I wanted to hear this apology for myself. I wanted to see if you really understood what happened last night." The manager nodded, his eyes darting to the side, avoiding her gaze. "Of course. I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience you experienced. It was a mix-up with the reservation system, and we should have handled it better. I truly regret that you felt unwelcome." Sasha raised an eyebrow, crossing her arms. "A mix-up? That's funny, because when I called last week to confirm, everything seemed fine. And when I showed up, your hostess didn't even seem to check the reservation book. She just looked at me. You knew exactly what was happening." The manager cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "I can assure you that was not our intention. The system just wasn't displaying the reservation properly. We're reviewing our processes to make sure this doesn't happen again." The words came out like a rehearsed speech, one he had likely said 1,000 times before. But it didn't matter. Sasha knew the truth. This wasn't just about a mistake with the reservation. It was the way the system worked, the way people like her were treated as invisible until they became a problem. The restaurant might be apologizing, but it wasn't for the right reasons. "You don't get it," she said quietly, her voice laced with the sting of years of silence. "This isn't about a reservation. It's about the fact that I walked into this place, and immediately you and your staff saw me as a threat. I don't belong here, right? That's what you think. That's what you were trying to do last night. Push me out without a second thought." His expression faltered. For the first time, she could see the cracks in the facade. He was uncomfortable, clearly not used to being confronted like this. "Ms. Thompson," he began, his voice losing some of its earlier smoothness. "I assure you, that's not how we operate here. We are a business that prides itself on treating everyone with respect. I've been working in the industry for over 20 years. I know what's at stake. I didn't mean for you to feel. I'm just saying it was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Sasha stood there, her heart pounding, her hands still clenched at her sides. The polite words, misunderstanding, respect, unfortunate, hung in the air, and yet they felt empty. She had heard them before, so many times, but today they meant nothing, not when they were coming from him. You didn't mean to make me feel unwelcome? Sasha repeated softly, a quiet fury building in her chest. You didn't mean to humiliate me? Because let me tell you, this isn't just about a reservation. This is about the fact that you looked at me and you made a decision. I don't belong here. And that's not a mistake. That's something deeper. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words faltered on his lips. For the first time, Sasha could see that he didn't have anything else to say. He didn't have an excuse left. Sasha stood up straight, her posture firm and unyielding. I'll leave now, but you should know this. The Grove may not be the only one with a broken system. She turned and walked out of the restaurant without another word. The manager stood there, his face frozen, watching her go. And in that moment, Sasha realized something. The apology she'd been hoping for wasn't what she needed. She didn't need his hollow words. She needed change, and change was coming. She could feel it in her bones. Sasha's mind was a whirlwind as she drove back from the Grove. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel, the anger from the meeting still coursing through her veins. The manager's apology had been hollow, a mere formality to make the incident go away. Nothing, he said, could erase the humiliation, the dismissive tone, or the silent judgments she had felt the moment she stepped into that restaurant. It's not enough. None of it is enough, she thought, feeling the weight of everything bearing down on her chest. When she walked into her apartment, she dropped her purse onto the kitchen counter, the leather making a soft thud against the granite. Her footsteps echoed through the empty space, the silence around her amplifying the tumult of thoughts in her mind. She walked to the window, staring out at the city, but it felt like she was looking at a different world, one that wasn't hers. She needed to act. As the hours passed, Sasha paced back and forth, unable to sit still. She opened her laptop, researching the restaurant's history. She found no shortage of glowing reviews, but there were subtle cracks if you looked closely. A few negative comments buried within the countless 5-star ratings stood out. Complaints from people who felt they weren't treated well, who didn't feel seen. She read through complaints one by one, noting the similarities between her experience and the others. Every single story of discrimination, of exclusion, seemed to echo her own. The more she read, the more she realized how deep the problem was, how systemic the bias at the Grove truly was. It's not just a one-off. This is a pattern. Her phone buzzed on the table, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Tasha. Girl, are you okay? Sasha let out a breath and typed a quick reply. I'm fine. Just processing everything. Tasha's response came quickly. You still gonna do something about it? Sasha stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her. She had always been one to avoid confrontation, to stay quiet when it felt easier. But this wasn't about being silent anymore. This was about something much bigger. This was about making sure that what happened to her didn't happen to anyone else. Her eyes wandered to the corner of the room, where a framed photograph of her grandmother sat. Her grandmother had lived through so much, fighting for her basic rights, for the chance to be treated like a human being. The stories of her struggles, of the things she had to endure just to survive, had been passed down to Sasha. She could hear her grandmother's voice in her mind. Don't you ever back down, baby. Don't you ever let them make you feel small. Sasha closed her eyes, taking in a slow breath. It was time. The next day, Sasha woke up with a sense of clarity. She had spent the night drafting a plan, pulling together the details she needed to make an impact. She knew it wouldn't be easy. The fight she was about to take on wouldn't be simple or straightforward, but she wasn't backing down. Not now. She picked up the phone and dialed her lawyer, Marcus Hale. She had worked with him before on smaller cases, but nothing like this. When he answered, his voice was steady, the professionalism in his tone a stark contrast to the storm inside her. Marcus, I'm ready, she said, her voice firm. I want to take action. He didn't hesitate. What do you need from me? Sasha explained her plan. She wanted to expose the Grove for what it truly was, an institution that perpetuated racial discrimination, a place that had erased her humanity the moment she walked in. She wanted to take legal action, but more than that, she wanted to expose them to the public. She wanted others to see what she had seen, to know the truth. You're going to need evidence, Marcus said, his voice measured. This won't be easy to prove unless you have something concrete, something undeniable. Sasha took a deep breath. I'm going to start reaching out to others. I'm going to find people who have had the same experience. I know I'm not the only one. Marcus was silent for a moment, then spoke again. If you're sure about this, we'll go forward. But understand, it's going to be hard. The restaurant has resources, and they'll fight you every step of the way. I'm ready, she said, the conviction in her voice surprising even herself. I've been fighting my whole life. This is just the next step. Sasha's first step was reaching out to people on social media. She posted about her experience, sharing the story in as much detail as she could, without sounding like she was simply venting. She was precise, detailing the way she had been treated, the way she had been dismissed with no explanation. She tagged the restaurant, hoping to spark some kind of response. But it wasn't just her voice that mattered now. She needed to find others. As the hours passed, the responses came flooding in. People of color, particularly black women, shared their stories of discrimination at the Grove. The patterns were unmistakable. Patrons had been ignored, humiliated, or outright turned away. The more she read, the angrier she became. This wasn't just about one restaurant. This was about something bigger. Sasha compiled the stories into a document, making sure to anonymize the information to protect those who were sharing. She knew she needed to keep this organized because this fight was going to be long, and she needed to be prepared. Later that afternoon, Tasha called again, and this time there was no hesitation in her voice. So you're really doing this? Tasha asked. I have to, Sasha replied, her voice steady. I can't stay quiet anymore. Tasha didn't say anything for a moment, but then a soft chuckle escaped her. You know I'm with you, right? Sasha smiled, her heart warming a little. I know. I need you, Tasha. All of us, we need to stick together on this. Then let's do it, Tasha said, her voice firm now. Let's bring them down. Sasha looked out the window, feeling a sense of resolve settle in her chest. The fight had only just begun, but she was ready. She wouldn't stop until they saw her, until they saw all of them. Sasha sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The soft hum of her laptop was the only sound in the room as she prepared to hit send. Her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the overwhelming certainty that she was doing the right thing. This wasn't just about a single restaurant or one bad experience. It was about something much larger, a pattern she could no longer ignore. She took a deep breath and typed the final sentence, then hit post. Last night, I was humiliated at the Grove restaurant. I had a reservation, but when I arrived, I was told I wasn't welcome. I was treated as if I didn't belong there. The manager refused to even hear my side of the story and asked me to leave. This wasn't an accident. This was racism. If you've had similar experiences, I encourage you to share your stories with me. We need to stand together. The message sat on her screen for a moment, and then she added the hashtag. Hashtag discriminated at the Grove. Her hand trembled slightly as she hit post. Sasha had always been someone who valued privacy. She'd never been one for airing her grievances publicly, but something had shifted inside her. This wasn't just about her. This was about all the time she had been dismissed, ignored, pushed aside, and made to feel like she didn't belong. She wasn't going to stay silent anymore. As she sat back, waiting for the responses to come in, her phone buzzed. Then again, and again. It was like the floodgates had opened. The first comment was from a friend, someone she had known from college. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Sasha, this is disgusting. I've had similar experiences at the Grove too. Never again. Her heart lifted slightly. She wasn't alone. Another comment came in, then another. Stories of people who have been ignored, treated poorly, or outright turned away because of the color of their skin. Each message was a punch to her gut, each one validating her pain. her outrage. But then the backlash started. Are you really going to cry racism over something as trivial as a reservation? Some people just want attention. Sasha's jaw clenched as she read the comment. It was the same tired argument she had heard too many times before: the dismissal, the invalidation of her lived experience, the victim blaming that so often accompanied these kind of conversations. You're just playing the race card. She fought the urge to respond immediately, to lash out in anger, but she had learned long ago that responding to every ignorant comment was a waste of energy. Instead, she focused on the stories from others, the ones that poured in faster than she could keep up with. There was strength in numbers. This wasn't just her voice anymore. It was a chorus of people speaking out against the same injustices. Sasha took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. The internet had a way of amplifying both support and hatred, and she was about to be at the center of a storm. But this storm, this one, she was ready for. By the next morning, the Grove was trending on social media. The hashtag discriminated at the Grove was everywhere. People from all walks of life, black, brown, and white, shared their own stories, not just about the restaurant, but about the discrimination they had faced in spaces like it. Stories of racism at dinner tables, in boardrooms, in waiting rooms. The restaurant's PR team quickly issued a statement, one that was carefully worded, full of empty apologies and promises to review their policies. But Sasha knew it wasn't enough. It never was. They weren't sorry for what had happened. They were sorry it had gone public. A few hours later, another post appeared from the Grove's official account. A photo of a smiling family enjoying their meal, captioned, "A warm welcome to everyone, always." The irony of it hit Sasha like a punch to the gut. Their welcome wasn't for everyone. She had seen that firsthand. But there was something that struck her deeper. The Grove wasn't just responding to her. They were trying to cover their tracks, to put on a face of inclusivity that wasn't real. They had gotten caught, and now they were scrambling to protect their brand. It was exactly what she had expected, and exactly why she needed to keep pushing. The next morning, Sasha was awakened by a phone call. It was from a news station. They had picked up her story. Her heart raced as she listened to producer on the other end. They wanted an interview. They wanted to hear her side of things, the full story. Sasha hesitated. She knew what this would mean. The media would scrutinize her every word, every emotion. But she also knew this was the moment she had been waiting for. She couldn't turn back now. "Okay," Sasha said, her voice steady. "I'll do it." That afternoon, the camera crew arrived at her apartment. The lights, the microphones, the bright studio colors. It all felt surreal. But Sasha knew exactly what she needed to say. She had rehearsed it in her head 1,000 times over the past 24 hours. This wasn't just about her experience. It was about amplifying the voices of everyone who had been silenced, who had been told they didn't matter. As the interview began, the words came easily. The anger, the pain, the deep need for change. It was all there, spilling out in a way she had never allowed herself to speak before. She was calm, composed, but every word carried weight. "This is bigger than one restaurant," Sasha said, her voice unwavering. "This is about a culture that has spent centuries telling people like me that we're not welcome, that we don't belong. And I'm here to tell you we belong." The producer nodded in approval as she finished the segment. Sasha knew this was only the beginning. The media storm was just heating up, and the Grove was in its sights. But this wasn't about revenge. This was about justice. This was about making sure that the world saw what had happened, and that it would never happen again. The next few days were a blur. News outlets picked up the story, and every time Sasha checked her phone, there were more stories, more voices. The backlash from people who refused to believe her, or others like her, only made the fight more important. The truth had come out, and it wasn't going away. The Grove may have thought they could silence her with an apology, but Sasha was just getting started. The days following the media storm felt like a blur, but one thing was clear. Sasha's life had irrevocably changed. What had started as a single post about a humiliating experience had now become a full-scale public reckoning. Every headline, every comment, every tweet was a reminder that her voice, no matter how small it felt at times, had power. But power came with a price, and Sasha was starting to realize just how heavy that price was. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus, her lawyer. They had set a meeting for later that afternoon. She had been preparing for this moment. But now that it was here, the weight of it felt more daunting than ever. This wasn't just about the Grove. This was about taking a stand for something bigger than herself. It was about the kind of change that could have ripple effects across the system. But it was also a battle that could destroy her if she wasn't careful. Sasha met Marcus at his office. His building was the kind of place that exuded power, sleek, modern, and cold. As she entered the lobby, the smell of polished marble and expensive leather reminded her of just how high the stakes had become. "Good to see you, Sasha," Marcus said as he stood to greet her. He was in his mid-40s, always well-dressed in sharp suits, and today was no different. His demeanor was calm, controlled, but Sasha could see the tension in his eyes. He knew what she was up against. "Thanks for meeting me," Sasha said, settling into the chair across from him. "I've been thinking about what's next, and I think I'm ready to move forward with the lawsuit, but I want to make sure we're doing this the right way." Marcus sat down and leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I've been following everything closely," he said, referring to the media storm that had erupted over the last few days. "You've made a real impact already. People are listening. But we need to make sure we have the right legal foundation before we proceed. The Grove will fight us at every step, and we need to be ready for what they'll throw our way." Sasha nodded, her mind racing. She had expected the legal process to be difficult, but she hadn't realized just how much work would go into making her case airtight. "I've been gathering testimonies from others who have experienced similar treatment at the Grove," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of frustration. "I've also been collecting every bit of evidence I can, social media posts, messages from people who've had the same experience. We can't just rely on my word." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's good. The more evidence we have, the better. But even with strong testimonies and public support, they'll still try to discredit you. They'll say you're exaggerating. They'll bring up your past, your character. They'll do everything they can to tear you down." The words landed like a punch, but Sasha knew he was right. It had already begun. The online trolls, the dismissive comments, it was all part of a larger strategy to make her look unstable, unreasonable, and angry for no reason. But she wasn't backing down. "I'm not afraid of what they say," Sasha replied, her voice firm. "I'm not afraid of them trying to tear me down. I know what happened, and I'm not going to let them get away with it." Marcus smiled slightly, his eyes glinting with respect. "I'm glad to hear that, because this fight is going to get ugly. But if we stick together, if we stay focused, we can win." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The lawsuit was officially filed, and suddenly, Sasha found herself in the midst of a legal battle that consumed nearly every waking hour. Marcus worked tirelessly to gather the necessary documents, the testimonies, and the evidence. Sasha continued to speak out, using her platform to keep the momentum going, but she also found herself becoming more and more exhausted. The weight of the media attention, the constant scrutiny, was starting to take its toll on her. But with each passing day, she felt more certain that this was the right fight. Her phone pinged with another message from Marcus one evening. He wanted to meet again. This time, it was important. Sasha arrived at his office, feeling the familiar mix of dread and anticipation. As she walked in, Marcus motioned for her to sit, his face serious. "We've made progress," he said, but his tone was guarded. "But the Grove is digging in. They're not going to settle, not without a fight." Sasha's stomach twisted. She had known this would happen. Corporations like the Grove had deep pockets and resources to burn. They would fight to protect their reputation at all costs. "Do you think they'll try to settle out of court?" Sasha asked, her voice tinged with hope. Marcus shook his head. "I don't think so. They're going to make this as public as possible, and they're going to pull every dirty trick in the book. I need you to be prepared for a long, hard fight, but I want you to understand something. We've got the public on our side. They're watching. Every move the Grove makes will be scrutinized." Sasha leaned back in her chair, taking in the information. She had known this fight would take time, but hearing it from Marcus made it feel real. The stakes were higher than ever. "And what about me?" she asked. "How do I protect myself from the backlash?" From what they'll say about me. Marcus's gaze softened. I won't lie to you. They'll attack you. They'll try to make you look like the villain. They'll say you're just out for money, for revenge. They'll try to paint you as someone who's just angry. But that's not who you are. And we have the truth on our side. Sasha took a deep breath. I'm ready. I won't back down. We can do this. Marcus nodded, a look of quiet admiration in his eyes. Then let's take them down. As the days turned into weeks, Sasha continued to face the pressure head-on. She was no longer just a woman fighting for justice in her own name. She was a symbol, a representation of every person who'd been mistreated, ignored, or dismissed by institutions built to serve the privileged. And she knew that the fight ahead would be long and difficult, but it was one she had to see through. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all of them. Sasha woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it, half blinded by the early morning sunlight filtering through the blinds. Her heart sank when she saw the flood of messages. It had been a few weeks since the lawsuit was filed, and things had taken an unexpected turn. What she had thought would be a long battle for justice had turned into a full-scale war, one she wasn't sure she was ready for. Most of the messages were from people she didn't know, their words ranging from angry accusations to outright threats. The same familiar insults had started to surface again. Attention seeker, race baiter, angry black woman. But this time, there was something more sinister about it. One comment stood out, a private message from an anonymous account. You're going to regret this. People like you never win. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, but she wasn't going to let them break her. This wasn't the first time people had tried to silence her, and it wouldn't be the last. But the truth was out there now, and she wasn't backing down. Sasha tossed her phone aside and forced herself to get out of bed. She had an interview scheduled that afternoon, one that would likely amplify the public backlash even more. But she had no choice. She had already made her decision. There was no going back. The interview was set up by one of the larger news outlets that had been covering her case. The producer had called her the night before, urging her to share her story one more time, this time with a larger audience. The hope was that her public support would drown out the critics, and that the pressure on the Grove would mount even more. As she sat in the green room, waiting for her turn, the tension in her body grew. It wasn't just the nerves, though she had plenty of those. It was the overwhelming weight of knowing that whatever she said next could make or break her. This was her moment, but it also felt like she was walking into a lion's den. The show host, a popular personality known for his tough, no-nonsense questions, walked in with a warm smile, but his eyes were sharp. Sasha, thanks for coming in, he said, extending a hand. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Sasha shook his hand, her grip firm. Thank you for having me. They sat down in front of the cameras, the bright lights making her skin feel too hot, too exposed. She knew the questions would come fast and hard, and she steeled herself for the inevitable. She had been preparing for this, reading the press, seeing the arguments online. The backlash was intense. Many were claiming she was using her race to manipulate the situation, others accusing her of fabricating the entire incident. You've gone viral, the host began. Your story has sparked nationwide outrage, but it's also sparked a lot of criticism. Some people say you're only making things worse, that you're dividing people unnecessarily. What do you say to that? Sasha took a deep breath, forcing her thoughts to remain clear. She wasn't going to let him steer the conversation where he wanted it to go. She knew what she needed to say. I say it's not about division, she replied, her voice calm but resolute. It's about visibility. It's about exposing a system that has consistently ignored people like me. The Grove didn't just turn me away that night. They turned away my humanity. And when that happens, it's not just personal, it's systemic. The host raised an eyebrow. But you're talking about a single incident, right? One bad night. Isn't it possible you're blowing this out of proportion? Sasha's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain composed. It wasn't just one night. It wasn't just one restaurant. It's the microaggressions that happen every day in spaces like this one, in boardrooms, in classrooms. People of color are constantly told they don't belong, they don't matter, unless they're in the right place at the right time. This isn't isolated. This is a pattern. The host seemed taken aback, and for a brief moment, The tension in the room felt palpable. The audience, who had been silent up until now, began to murmur as if they were unsure of how to react. Sasha could feel the shift in the air. This was the moment she needed to own. She continued, her voice steady now. I'm not doing this for attention. I'm doing this for justice. People are finally listening. It's long overdue. The host leaned forward, his expression turning more sympathetic, but there was still a calculated edge in his tone. But there's a cost to this. Sasha, the backlash against you has been fierce. People have called you a liar, even accused you of trying to destroy a business. How do you handle that kind of response? How do you live with the fact that some people see you as the villain in this story? Sasha's heart pounded, but her response came without hesitation. I've had people try to silence me my entire life. The only difference now is that I'm not backing down. The truth is, the backlash isn't about me. It's about people afraid of change, people afraid of the truth. If telling the truth means they'll hate me, then I'll take that. She could see the shift in the host's demeanor, his earlier cynicism replaced with something resembling respect. The interview went on, but Sasha didn't feel the need to engage with every provocation. She had made her point. The truth had been heard. When the interview aired that night, the response was mixed. There were those who praised Sasha for her courage, for standing up when so many others would have stayed silent. But there were also voices that attacked her relentlessly. One news outlet even went as far as to air a segment comparing her to an attention-seeking celebrity, mocking her every word. Sasha watched it all unfold from her apartment, her phone constantly buzzing with new comments, messages, and alerts. The backlash was real, and it was painful, but Sasha was no longer surprised by it. She had known from the beginning that this would be hard. The hardest part wasn't the backlash. It was a realization that the fight she was waging wouldn't just affect her. It was going to affect everyone who had ever been made to feel less than. But in the midst of it all, there was a sense of clarity she had never felt before. The truth was on her side, and no amount of hate or lies would change that. The courtroom was a sea of sterile faces and quiet murmurs, a stark contrast to the storm that had been brewing outside. Sasha sat in the plaintiff's chair, her back straight, her hands clasped together tightly in her lap. Her lawyer, Marcus, stood beside her, reviewing his notes one last time before the trial began in earnest. Outside the windows, the bright sunlight cast long shadows across the marble floors, but inside, the air felt heavy, as though the weight of the world rested on Sasha's shoulders. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. After everything, the media storm, the threats, the doubts, the growing public backlash, she had made it this far. But now that the moment was finally here, the one she had prepared for all this time, she felt both determined and afraid. The room, the atmosphere, it was all a reminder of the system that had worked against her, a reminder of the long road ahead. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Sasha took a deep breath, bracing herself. This was it. The trial had been a long time coming. Months of paperwork, pre-trial motions, and gathering evidence had led to this day. The Grove had made it clear from the beginning that they were prepared to fight to the bitter end, but Sasha knew something they didn't. She had the truth on her side. The judge called the session to order, and the proceedings began. The first part of the trial focused on the specifics of the night at the Grove, Sasha's reservation, the way she was treated when she arrived, and the manager's refusal to listen to her side of the story. Marcus, with his usual calm demeanor, walked through the details, recounting each moment with precision and clarity. But Sasha knew that the most difficult part was still to come, the defense. The Grove's attorneys were slick and polished, accustomed to high-profile cases. They began their cross-examination, aiming to poke holes in Sasha's testimony, to paint her as an opportunist who had misunderstood the situation. They even attempted to discredit her, questioning her recollection of events and insinuating that her emotions had clouded her judgment. Sasha held her ground. She refused to let their tactics break her. The questioning was intense, but she answered each one with a clarity that was unnerving. She was unwavering, her voice steady as she described how she had been treated, how her very presence in the Grove had been seen as a disruption to the establishment's quiet, exclusive atmosphere. We have evidence that there was a technical issue with the reservation system, one of the Grove's attorneys argued. Isn't it possible that this was a simple mistake? Perhaps it wasn't about race at all. Sasha's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. You're right. It's possible that it started with a mistake. But the way the staff treated me, that wasn't a mistake. The manager didn't even bother to listen to my side. He didn't even check the system properly before dismissing me. And that's where it became clear. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Her voice rang out in the quiet courtroom, and the silence that followed seemed to hang heavy in the air. There was no way to spin it. They had tried to reduce her experience to a simple misunderstanding, but Sasha knew what had happened, and so did everyone else in the room. The trial stretched into days, and as the case continued, Sasha's resolve only grew stronger. The more she spoke, the more she realized how much this fight had become about something greater than the restaurant. It was about all the time she had been made to feel like she didn't belong. It was about the deep-seated systems that allowed people to feel entitled to treat others as less than. And now, it was about showing the world that things had to change. The courtroom was packed with people who had come to support her. Activists, friends, strangers who had heard her story and understood the fight she was waging. They sat silently behind her, their presence a quiet but powerful reminder of the movement that had grown from one woman's call for justice. Finally, the day of the closing arguments arrived. Marcus stood before the judge and jury, delivering a statement that summed up the case. He spoke with passion, but also with the precision of a man who knew that every word mattered. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about more than a single night at a restaurant. It's about the systemic bias that exists in our society, the silent but pervasive discrimination that people like Sasha Thompson face every single day. It's about the right to be heard, to be treated with dignity, and to have our humanity acknowledged. What happened to Sasha at the Grove wasn't an isolated incident. It was a reflection of a culture that still treats people of color as if they don't matter. But today, we have the opportunity to say, we matter. We can make a choice. We can decide that this behavior is unacceptable, and we can hold institutions accountable. The room was still as Marcus finished. His words hung in the air, echoing with truth and power. Sasha couldn't help but feel a rush of hope. She had fought so hard, and now she could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. The defense's closing argument was predictably different, slick, rehearsed, and aimed at undermining Sasha's credibility. They argued that the Grove had acted in good faith, that no harm had been intended, and that any error had been unintentional. They begged the jury to focus on the facts and ignore the emotional weight of the case. But Sasha knew the truth, and she knew that the jury couldn't ignore the truth. The jury deliberated for hours. It felt like an eternity to Sasha. She paced the courtroom, unable to sit still. The weight of the decision was more than just a legal battle. It was about every person who had ever been dismissed or silenced, every person who had ever been made to feel like they didn't matter. When the jury finally returned, the room fell silent. Sasha's heart raced in her chest. The judge called for the verdict. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Sasha Thompson, the foreman announced. The words hung in the air like a dream. The victory was hers. It was real. Sasha blinked back tears, her breath coming in short bursts. She had won. The Grove was held accountable for its actions. The verdict was a resounding message that discrimination would not be tolerated, that it was time for change. But as the courtroom erupted in applause, Sasha knew that the victory came at a cost. The emotional toll of the fight had been immense. The scars, both visible and invisible, would remain. But in that moment, standing tall before the world, Sasha knew one thing for sure. Her fight had meant something. She had fought for justice, and had won. The weeks after the interview felt like an unrelenting storm. The media's spotlight on Sasha had not only amplified her fight against the Grove, but also brought every dark corner of her life into the public eye. It wasn't just a backlash from strangers. Friends, family, colleagues, even people she had once admired, all began to distance themselves, unsure where they stood in this public battle. The emotional cost was mounting, and Sasha was beginning to feel the weight of it. She had become a symbol, whether she wanted to or not. The stories about her were no longer just about what had happened at the Grove. They were about her as a person, her character, her worth. Headlines were popping up on every major news outlet, dissecting her every move. Social media flooded her with both support and vitriol. Some people called her a hero, Others called her a liar. But in the midst of it all, Sasha began to lose track of herself. At first, she had handled the attacks with the kind of resilience she had honed over the years, but lately, it felt harder to maintain that same composure. The messages were getting more personal, the words cutting deeper. She had tried to ignore the trolls, try to focus on the positive support, but it was becoming nearly impossible to keep the anger, the sadness, and the frustration at bay. The pressure from the lawsuit was becoming overwhelming, too. As much as Sasha had tried to prepare herself for the legal battle, nothing could prepare her for the emotional toll it took to relive that night at the Grove, to recount again and again how she had been humiliated, dismissed, and made to feel invisible. It was late one night when everything seemed to finally come to a head. Sasha sat in her living room, scrolling through her phone, when she saw a notification from Marcus. Her lawyer had messaged her a link to an article that had just been published. It was titled, "The Truth Behind Sasha Thompson's Lawsuit, a Case of Misunderstanding or a Vengeful Publicity Stunt." Her heart sank. She clicked the link, her eyes scanning the first few lines. The article was a sharp critique of her actions, claiming that the whole incident had been blown out of proportion. It painted her as an opportunist, someone looking to leverage her race for personal gain. The piece claimed that the evidence she had presented was flimsy, that the testimonies from others were unreliable. Worse, it insinuated that her actions were less about fighting injustice and more about seeking fame. She dropped her phone onto the couch, feeling as though the air had been knocked out of her. Vengeful publicity stunt? The words echoed in her mind, and for a moment, it felt like the world had turned on her. The anger was there, simmering beneath the surface, but was also mixed with something darker. Doubt. What if they were right? What if she was just another angry person looking for a fight? What if the lawsuit wasn't going to bring justice, but instead just make her look like a fool? Her chest tightened, and she stood up, pacing back and forth. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Tasha. Sasha grabbed it quickly, desperate for some kind of reassurance. "You okay? I saw the article. Don't let them get to you, girl. You know what you're doing." Sasha wanted to believe her. She wanted to say, "You're right. I know what I'm doing." But the truth was, she wasn't so sure anymore. The next morning, Sasha's exhaustion caught up with her. She barely slept, tossing and turning, her mind racing with doubt and frustration. But she had a meeting scheduled with Marcus to go over the latest developments in the case, and she couldn't cancel. She had to keep going. She had to keep fighting. When she arrived at his office, he was already waiting, his face grim. He greeted her with a nod, and they both sat down. "Sasha, I know this has been rough," Marcus said, his voice full of understanding. "But we need to talk strategy. The Grove is going to come at us with everything they've got. This article is just the beginning." Sasha nodded, tried to mask the fatigue in her eyes. "I saw it. They're already trying to discredit me. They're calling me a liar." Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. "They'll do that, and they'll keep doing it. But the key is to stay focused. The public is still with you. The movement is growing. We've got a lot of support from other organizations, activists, and even high-profile figures who are standing behind you." Sasha listened, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was all starting to slip away from her. The support was there, yes, but so was the vitriol. She could see the writing on the wall. She wasn't sure how much longer she could withstand the constant barrage. "I don't know how much longer I can do this, Marcus," she said quietly, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "It's like everything's falling apart. I can't handle the stress. The back and forth with the media, the pressure from the lawsuit. I just feel like I'm drowning." Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he gave her a moment to breathe, his gaze softening. He understood, but he also knew that this was part of the battle. "You're not alone, Sasha," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "We're all in this together. You've already come so far. The people who are trying to tear you down, they're scared. You're making a difference whether they like it or not." Sasha wanted to believe him. She wanted to find that strength again, that resolve that had gotten her this far. But right now, the only thing she felt was a heavy weight of exhaustion pressing down on her. Later that evening, as Sasha walked back to her apartment, she felt a strange sense of numbness settle in. She was used to fighting for what she believed in, but this fight, This one felt different. The cost was so much higher. The emotional toll was crushing her, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep going. She was at her breaking point. But deep down, somewhere in the corner of her heart, she knew she couldn't walk away. She had to keep fighting for herself, for every person who had ever felt what she felt, for everyone who had been dismissed, ignored, and made to feel small. She wasn't done. Not yet. Sasha stood by the window in her apartment, gazing out at the city skyline as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the streets, and for the first time in weeks, the world outside felt quieter. The noise of the media, the social media storm, the courtroom, everything seemed to recede into background, leaving a sense of stillness, a stillness that felt almost too peaceful, too final. The legal battle was over. The lawsuit against the Grove had been won, the manager's resignation confirmed, and the restaurant was ordered to pay a significant fine for their discriminatory practices. It felt like a victory, but the cost had been steep. Sasha had been through the emotional ringer. Her personal life had been dissected, her integrity questioned, and her very identity challenged. She had become a symbol in the fight against systemic racism, whether she had wanted to be or not. There had been moments during the trial, especially during the long nights of doubt and fear, when she had wondered if it was worth it. But now, standing here in the quiet of her apartment, she knew it had been worth it. She took a deep breath, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, the weight of the moment heavy in her chest. She had won the case, but there was no denying that the journey had left her scarred. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced down at the screen. It was a text from Tasha. "Girl, you did it. So proud of you. Can't wait to see you tonight. We're celebrating." A small smile tugged at the corners of Sasha's lips. She typed back quickly, her fingers flying across the screen. "Thanks, Tasha. I'm so ready to finally relax. You have no idea." The truth was, Sasha wasn't sure what relaxing even looked like anymore. The way of the past few months had altered something inside her, something fundamental. It wasn't just about the case. It was about everything that had led her here. The unspoken truths she had lived with for so long, the quiet resentment, the exhaustion that built up over years of being overlooked, of being silenced. Sasha had fought for herself, yes, but she had also fought for everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. She had fought for the people who had suffered in silence, for the ones who had never been given a voice. And yet, as she looked out the window at the city below, she wondered if the fight was ever truly over. Later that evening, Sasha met Tasha at a small bar downtown. It was a quiet spot, one they had frequented in the past, a place where they could talk without the noise of the world intruding. The neon sign outside buzzed faintly, casting an amber glow across the street. Tasha was already there, sitting at a corner booth with a drink in front of her. She looked up as Sasha approached, her eyes lighting up. "Girl," Tasha said, throwing her arms around Sasha in a tight hug. "You did it. I'm so proud of you. I don't even know how you handled all of that. I would have lost my mind." Sasha laughed softly, but there was a bittersweetness to it. It was a lot. "Honestly, I don't even know how I made it through, but it's over now." Tasha slid into the booth beside her, ordering another round of drinks before looking at her seriously. "You know, I've been thinking about this a lot. I'm proud of you, Sasha. You've changed things. I know it doesn't feel like it right now, but you've made a huge impact. People are paying attention, and the Grove will never be the same." Sasha looked down at her drink, swirling the ice in her glass. But did it really change anything? Yeah, they got punished. But how many other places like that are out there? How many more people are still being treated like I was? The words hung heavy in the air between them, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Tasha seemed to sense the weight of Sasha's exhaustion, the feeling that no matter how much she fought, the fight was never over. "You're right," Tasha said finally. "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. But you have to remember, what you did, that matters. It gives people hope. It shows them that they don't have to be quiet anymore. They don't have to let these things slide." Sasha looked at her friend, the emotion bubbling up in her chest. She had heard this kind of encouragement before, but this time it felt different. Tasha was right. This fight had given people a voice, and though the battle for equality wasn't over, the shift had begun. "I don't know what's next," Sasha said, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking about it a lot, about what comes after." "Whatever it is, you're not alone," Tasha said, her hand resting on Sasha's. "You've got us. You've got people who are listening, who are ready to make a change." Sasha felt a warmth spread through her chest at her friend's words, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of peace. Maybe the fight wasn't over, but it didn't have to be one she carried alone. There was a community. There were others who understood, who had walked the same road, and were ready to walk it again, together. As the night wore on, the laughter and light-hearted chatter between Sasha and Tasha began to lift some of the heaviness from Sasha's heart. She had won a significant victory, but more than that, she had found a renewed sense of purpose. The world hadn't changed overnight, but she had helped spark something. She had shown that standing up for what's right, even in the face of fear and uncertainty, was worth it. Sasha knew that the journey would continue. The fight for equality, for justice, was ongoing, but she had become part of a movement that was growing stronger every day. And though the road ahead would be long, she was ready to walk it. As the night came to a close, Tasha raised her glass. "To you," she said, "to change." Sasha clinked her glass against her friend's, the weight of everything she had gone through fading into the background for just a moment. And as she looked around the room at the people celebrating, laughing, living their lives, Sasha realized something. Change wasn't just about the victories you won. It was about the courage to keep going, to keep fighting, even when the world made it feel impossible. And as she looked forward to the future, she knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, she would never stop fighting.